Again, right. They bá ti pọ̀ wọ́n máa mix ọmọ mi ní ọ̀dọ́ ìlú jẹ́ àwọn àgbà. So ìmọ̀ bá ẹ̀rọ ti bẹ̀. So ìmọ̀ bá díẹ̀ ìjọba ìmọ̀ ti fi Arabic aspect yẹn ẹ̀ ní gbọ́. Again, ó fi pé táwọn bá ti fi kí ó. So it is now about propagation of Arabian culture. Again, but Omo is what is having major impact on indigenous languages and culture and culture. It's about oh, I know. So, major impacts in the so we say we also on Islam. Islam okay.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay.
Hello,
Yeah, I think there has been some delays.
Hello, we can hear you.
Yeah, I can see.
So we can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay, all right. Just a minute. There is one of the participants that is trying to enter. We need to forward the link to them. Yes, there's already a delay.
So tennis on the okay.
All right. Just a minute. We have, I think, some participants are finding it difficult to join here. We need to. Ogachuku, can you get in touch with Henrietta?
Okay, she's here.
Okay, she just joined. Okay. All right. Sorry. Welcome everyone to this final session. It has been amazing since we started connecting with participants from different parts of the world, I would say. And the two previous sessions we've had, they've all been engaging, and we are bringing our session to an end with the last 5 presenters. For this session, we'll be taking a presentation from Peter is it Ketio? Pardon me if I'm not pronouncing it correctly. Then from Henrietta Okafor and from Ogochukwu Ukwezi, Gideon Umezurike, and Ekikere Obon Anika. Take note in the course of individual presentation. So at the end, we entertain all the questions. So we say hello to the participants that are there physically. So we are glad to connect with you. And our online attendees, you're all welcome to be part of this session. So before we proceed, I don't know if anybody has any comment, question, or concern that we need to address before we could move on. Okay. In the absence of that, we will our first presenter who will be taking us on in Akweke Mazes, The Death of Vivek Oji. That's by Henrietta Ifoma Okafor. Henrietta, are you there?
I'm here.
Henrietta,
Okay, all right.
I'm
Henrietta
already
Kaffer is a
encountering some
staff member.
network problems.
Just hold on while they read your bio before you proceed.
Okay.
Mhm.
Henrietta Kaffer is a staff member of the University of Nigeria and Nsukka. She lectures both in English and Literary Studies and the use of English units, School of General Studies, UNM. She has attended several academic conferences and workshops. Her research interests include, but are not limited to, disability studies, African literature, gender and queer studies, migration studies, colonial literature, feminism, and representation of the self, to mention but a few. She is currently working on disability and ableism. So, Henrietta, please turn on your camera and you can have the floor.
I'm experiencing network challenges. It comes and goes. So my presentation.
Okay,
Can I
it's
start?
okay. It's okay.
Okay.
Yes, you can do.
Okay. The topic of my Hello, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, you are back now.
Your
Hello.
network is a big problem. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I had to use my MTN MiFi, but even that one doesn't appear to be as strong as I had anticipated. But let me get going before it happens again. My topic is grief.
Maybe because of time, we may need to give you some time while you
This was
address
affirmed
our
the intensity
network
of.
challenge.
Okay,
If
it's not
you
something I
may
can
need
do.
some time, can you hear me? If you may need some time to sort your network issues, another person can proceed. So we'll return to your presentation later. So because we can't get what you are saying, and we may not be able to pick much from that. So you can take this time to find a way to sort out your network issues while we hope to return to your presentation before we are done. So we can proceed to another participant. What do you think? You can't even hear me. All right. All right. Yeah, I think while we hope to get back to her, we may need to proceed with Peter's presentation. Peter will be taking us on electoral debt and the changing patterns of grieving in TV land of central Nigeria.
So, Peter,
Uh,
Peter Menga Keto, PhD is of the Department of International Studies and Diplomacy, Benson, Idahosa University, Benin City, Nigeria. He holds a PhD in History and International Studies and was a part-time lecturer in the Department of History at Benue State University, Makurdi. His research areas include elections, electoral violence, decoloniality, and diplomatic, social, and security studies. He co-authored the book Thief Displacements in Benue, Nasarawa, and Taraba States, 2013 to 2019. He is a member of the Historical Society of Nigeria and a research fellow with the African Humanities Research and Development Circle. He's also a research fellow with the Institute of Research and Policy Integration in Africa. Dr. Ketio, forgive that poor pronunciation, has published in local, national, and international journals and has contributed chapters to several book projects in Nigeria. You have the floor, Peter.
Okay. Thank you. Good morning, all. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, please.
I can hear you.
Okay. So I'm happy to be presenting. You know why I intend to be in Lagos? On that fateful day I wanted to travel, I told you, and that's why I'm presenting virtually today. Like you rightly said, my topic for presentation is electoral death and the changing patterns of grieving in Tivland of Benue State. You know, in Tivland, as it is now, we are even grieving. But as it is, the causes of the death is not electoral violence, but herdsmen attack. But of course, my topic is on electoral violence and the changing patterns of grieving in Tivland. If you look at electoral violence, you agree with me that electoral violence is a global problem. You know, research has shown that violence occurs during electoral contests. Whenever you hear the name elections, especially in Africa and in Nigeria, just know that violence is going to occur. As a matter of fact, between 1989 to 2017, electoral violence has caused more than 17,000 deaths. And then even here in Nigeria, electoral violence is responsible for several deaths. In 2011, for instance, 800 persons were killed in Nigeria as a result of electoral violence. And of course, in Tivland, which is the area of the research, electoral violence is also responsible for a lot of death. As electoral violence itself is a serious issue in Nigeria's electoral process, scholars have researched about electoral violence. For instance, scholars have looked at the history, they have looked at the causes of electoral violence. For instance, I will look at the implication of electoral violence on Nigerian democratic practice. Some have looked at the implications of electoral violence on Nigeria's internal security. However, missing in literature is how victims of electoral violence are being grieved. You know, as Africans, grieving the dead is an important cultural, important cultural significance. But most times, scholars just look at the electoral violence and then they give you the names of people that have killed, people that have been killed, and then now to try to see how these victims, these people are grieved or are mourned, we now discover that there is near absence of literature, and then it's precisely against that background that this paper is coming to fill this knowledge gap by trying to see how in Tivland, how victims of electoral violence are being to establish the fact that electoral violence is a process or an act that leads to the death of people during electioneering period. And of course, to provide a conceptual framework for understanding the uniqueness of electoral deaths and how they are being grieved in Tivland or central Nigeria. And then, of course, this intellectual task is accomplished by using primary, secondary, and multidisciplinary sources or data. And then having established this background, what then is electoral debt? There is no way you define electoral debt before defining what electoral violence is. And then, of course, as scholars will say, electoral violence acts that undermines the electoral process. There are threats, and sometimes these threats now result to the killing of people. Because in most scenarios of electoral violence, sometimes you see people are being killed, sometimes you see matches are used to even kill people, and all of that. And then, of course, grieving. What then is grieving? In this paper, of course, scholars have defined grieving, which because of time, I just want to tell us how I've defined grieving in this paper. Grieving is a provoked response to death. It is an emotional pain that can normally come arising from death or misfortune. And then before we progress, I just want us to have a background of how an understanding of death and grieving in Cleveland. Death, as we always, as we say, or as every other person we argue, is something that must happen. As far as we are humans, it's destined that there's a time that all of us will die. But in as much as death is inevitable, that all of us we must we must pass through death to experience a life beyond or everlasting life, as Christians would say. Death, for any death to happen in Cleveland, there are supernatural forces that are behind death. Thief cosmology, Thief believe that natural force that is responsible. And most times, this supernatural force is what they call witches, what they call bata, that is bata witches that are responsible. And then because of that, despite this, deaths are even categorized. Even in thief cosmology, you have deaths that they call natural deaths, and then deaths that are unnatural. And then for deaths, for electoral deaths, these deaths are called unnatural. And then since they are unnatural, because one, most times they are from violent deaths, from acts of violence. So the thief regard them as unnatural or untimely death. So since they are not natural deaths, there's a way victims of such deaths are being grieved. In most cases, during funerals, you now even discover that food, for instance, is
You
not
have
even served.
2 minutes left to your conclusion. Sorry for interruption.
Okay, so you now even discover that even food, for instance, is not even served. And then you now even discover that during the death inquisition, because the thief people, whenever death will occur, they will always want to investigate that who is responsible. And then in most times during death inquisition, as soon as they identify a particular force, that this is the person or this is the matter, that the witch that is responsible, sometimes you see certain sanctions are being placed on such a person by both the matrimonial and patrimonial kinsmen of such a victim. But for electoral deaths, we have noticed that the fact that most of them are being killed by gunshots, we have even noticed that most of them are even given elaborate burial ceremonies. And then during grieving, you now see people even coming to put on uniforms. Foods are being served. You now see cows are being given to several groups, which contradicts the thief belief system of money on natural deaths. And then most times, such victims are being considered as heroes of democracy. Sometimes they will not say that this one died in trying to entrench, in trying to exercise his civil rights. And then this has changed the grieving pattern as once grieved in the land. that ends my paper. I'm sure I've concluded within your 2 minutes, sir.
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry, I forgot to mention earlier that once you are presenting and you see a hand raised on the screen, it means you have 2 minutes to your conclusion. So we won't go ahead to be interrupting your presentation when you are talking. So just watch out for any raise of hand on your screen as you are presenting, as a reminder to be rounding off your presentation. All right, thank you very much, Peter. Our next presenter is Ogochukwu Ukweze, who will be taking us on, I hope everyone can hear me, who will be taking us on who in the world cared for his grief, disenfranchisement, and the call of care in Arize Ifekando's Where the Heart Sleeps. All right, Ogochukwu, just a minute. Ogochukwu Ukweze is a PhD student in comparative literature at Penn State University. He is on the faculty of the Department of English and Literary Studies, University of Nigeria, Nsukka. His research interests include mourning, decolonization, and African futures in literary and visual cultures. Ogochukwu, you have the floor now.
So, thank you. My title was adjusted briefly, so I added homosexuality to give an ease of understanding of where I'm coming from. So the driving question of my work is, how does the story Where the Heart Sleeps deploy the context of mourning in Africa to make a case for queer visibility and inclusion? So the argument I make is that the story of mourning practices in Ifa Kado's short story, Where the Heart Sleeps, implicates the principle of African humanism, which organizes mourning practice in Africa, but is then contradicted by homophobia. To have an idea of the story, it's a short story published as one of the stories in the collection by Arinze Ifekandu titled God's Children Are Little Broken Things in 2022. So in the story, a woman named Nkiru discovers that her husband Dubem cheats on her with another man named Tochukwu. So she's broken by the infidelity and especially by the discovery of that closeted sexuality. She leaves home with her daughter, Nonye. Then the man brings his lover to live with him. Suddenly, this man, Dubem, dies. So the man lover contacts the wife and his brothers. They come, take the deceased body, and bars him from being part of the mourning. Then the late man's daughter visits his father's lover in their home. It's an encounter that eventually makes her to sympathize with him, especially because his grief is not validated. Eventually, the wife and the late man's brothers come to the house to drive the male lover out of the house. The daughter intervenes and insists that her father's male lover is part of their family. So the story ends with the relatives driven away instead, while the wife, the daughter, and the male lover stay back in the house. So Arinze Ifekandu is himself a Nigerian queer writer. My interest is in the way he problematizes grieving. First, he establishes the grievability of homosexual as a given. And this grievability is already something that Butler calls a political act of affirming life. But disenfranchised grief itself entails denying one either the right to mourn or the right to be mourned, sometimes both. However, if I can raise the right of the homosexual person to be mourned as already a given, so what is in contest in this story is the right to mourn. The context of mourning is strategic for critiquing discrimination based on sexuality, because mourning, especially in Africa, is an instantiation of the belief in the co-constitution of life, the interdependence between the living and the non-living. Mourning rites are carried out with the belief that it facilitates the transition of the dead to the land of the ancestors. and qualifies them for possible reincarnation. Knowing that the dead depends on them to rest or reincarnate, why they, the living, depend on the ancestors who visit as mask for social cohesion and depend on those who reincarnate for communal continuity. The living religiously carry out mourning rituals. This philosophy of interrelationality and mutual care is what Ezekiel Mbaflele describes as African humanism and is indigenously referred to as Ubuntu. According to Mbaflele, in African humanism, I quote, there is no dichotomy between the material and the spiritual world. There is a continuity reinforced by the interrelationships and interconnectedness. That is, animal life, plant life, and inanimate objects have a life of their own, which is part of us. End of quote. This means that community and interrelationality is the basis of African life world. Then the contradiction of Ubuntu or this African humanism that obtains in homophobic discrimination becomes more prominent in mourning. To critique this contradiction, the story targets community, its constitution, cultural forms, and function. The family is the smallest unit of the community, and it is presented in this story as where the politics of exclusion is challenged and rethought. The family is Africa's social security system, according to Ojike Mbono, and it determines one's belongingness and survival. The sustenance and transmission of cultural heritage and social formation is contingent on the continuity of family relations. To underline the centrality of gay care, family, a source of personal and communal protection, receives the responsibility of determining belongingness. Once Tochukwu, the gay lover, is accepted into the family, which is literally and metaphorically a microcosm of society, the call for care will have been answered. Nonye, the late Tochukwu's daughter, serves as the spool around which the family thread loops. She is the one that brings her mother and her father's lover together into familiar mutual responsibility. As a member of the family, Tochukwu is seen, his grief is validated, and his right to mourn his lover respected and preserved. When we follow Nonye's gaze, we see a photograph through which the anticipated world of acceptability is projected. The photograph is strategically positioned above Tochukwu's bed, and this helps the reader to see the kind of community that is envisaged when Ubuntu is embraced through and through. The photograph leads to a world of acceptance and information, which is materialized in the photographer who took the shot. According to Susan Langer, quote, although the camera is an observation station, the act of photographing is more than passive observing. Like sexual voyeurism, it's a way of at least tacitly, often explicitly, encouraging whatever is going on to keep on happening. To take a picture is to have an interest in things as they are, in the start remaining unchanged. To be in complicity with whatever makes a subject interesting and what photographing. So by this, photographing and capturing the moment, the photographer affirms gay love, views it with perpetuity. The location of its display further accentuates this desire to sustain the reality it captures. The photograph also alludes to the location where it is taken, Kigali, which is an African city with a resemblance of the desired world. Kigali is the capital of Rwanda, an African country iconic for LGBTQ subjectivity, because it is one of the few countries in Africa where homosexuality is legal. The country also signed the UN declaration condemning violence against LGBT people in 2011. But through Nonye's vision of a civil alternative world in the photograph, the homophobic culture that disenfranchises the bereaved homosexuality. To ensure the continuity of this realization of Ubuntu in relating with gay persons, the African figure of mother or woman as a resource for intergenerational transfer of cultural knowledge, otherwise regarded as matriarchal, is the though betrayed, archive She, whose Igbo name means one for the future, is the one to impart generation with a new sense of care and responsibility towards persons of different sexuality. Nkiru's malleability and readiness to adapt to new culture is followed in the way she sings songs that belong to Nonye's generation, as quoted by the narrator. As the one who bears the burden of betrayal in the family and the one who submits to her daughter's choice of having her husband's gay lover as part of the family, she is in a better position to tell the story of African humanism, or plastic humanism, as Mbembe prefers to call it. In other words, the story prepares her as the symbol of cultural continuity of Ubuntu and discontinuity of homophobia. To conclude, if I can do story maximizes the resources of African culture, namely mourning and Ubuntu philosophy, to challenge homophobia and call for to a world that lives the principle of interdependence as proclaimed in I Am Because You Are. Thank you.
All right, very much. Okay. Yeah, I think the
I'm
Henrietta,
right
you
here.
can mute. All right. Yeah, you presentation.
All right,
Please,
thank you very
you need
much.
to maximize the
Sorry
time.
about
No
Yes,
problem.
that's what I want to do now. These work affirm the intensity and multifarious nature of grief experienced by characters in the novel, The Death of Vivek Oji. My topic, once again, is grief in Akweke Emezi's The Death of Vivek Oji. Grief here is the focal point of this work. The narrative distinguishes the grief felt by the characters, different from all other griefs. This is because from the very beginning of the work, we were told that the very day that the market was burnt, that was the day that Vivek was born. Surprisingly, on that same day, Vivek's grandmother, Ahonna, also died. And a particular mark on her suddenly appeared on Vivek's foot. And that was what reinforced the belief that Vivek had reincarnated, but not as a woman this time around, but as a man. And it caused a lot of confusion because ordinarily he would have been named. But because he came out as a boy, he wouldn't be given the name of a woman. It appears that because he reincarnated in the form of a man, it appears that it affects some kind of blackout that was referred to in the work as what happens, he will be oblivious of his environment. He will not know what is happening within the environment. The grief in this work is so intense because
It seems like a network challenge has returned again. Your network challenge has returned again.
in mystery and confusion. The mother was devastated because she doesn't know what happened to the son who killed in a pool of his own blood, and he was up. So grief current him in African
Hello,
literature.
Henrietta, can you hear me? We are having trouble hearing what you're saying. I think the network has begun to interrupt your presentation again. I don't know. Maybe if we have some time left at the end of the two remaining presenters, we will return to our presentation because there is no point proceeding when people cannot hear you. I think she is even completely off. All right. Our next presenter is Gideon Mezurike. I don't know if he is already online here. Gideon, we don't have him yet. Okay, so we proceed to the next person who is Ekikerobong Anyekan Usoro. Maybe you can help me with the pronunciation of your name if I'm not getting it correctly.
Ekikerobong Usoro.
Okay, Ekikerobong Usoro will be taking us on grief and the phantoms of depression, remodeling the Kubler-Ross model in Gaia's Transcendental Kingdom. Yeah.
So,
Who
Ekikere
is it?
Ubang Usoro is a master's degree student at the University of Ibadan, Nigeria, where he studies English with focus on literature. He holds a bachelor's degree in English from University of Uyo, Nigeria. His research interests include theory and criticism, African literature, gender studies, and postcolonial literature. His first essay, The Supernatural and Igbo Cosmology in Chigozie Obiama's An Orchestra of Minorities, is published by Impressions, while his second essay, Contextualizing Male Privilege in Cheluchi Onyemelukwe Onuobia's Son of the House, within the African Meltanchon, forgive that should be German. It's published by Ethiopian Journal of English Literary and Cultural Studies. Some polemical essays of his are underway, including the psychoanalytic superfluity and the excision of God. He was shortlisted for the 2024 E.E. Sule and Savage Prize for African Literary Criticism with his essay, Postcolonialism in Transition, a zero counter-discursive approach to Joseph Lucius Young's and Belch's. You're welcome, Usoro.
Thank you very much. My topic, as earlier said, is grief and the phantoms of depression, remodeling the Kubler-Ross model in Giasi's Transcendent Kingdom. Now, Giasi is a Ghanaian novelist who resides in the United States currently. So, from the topic, modeling what Kubler-Ross says are the 5 stages of grief. So, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is a Swiss-born psychiatrist. So, according to her, grief is in 5 stages. The first stage is denial, and I must make a distinction between denial, according to Kubler-Ross, and denial as used in the novel Transcendent Kingdom. So, according to Kubler-Ross, the second stage is and then acceptance. So, in the first stage, you are denying the death of a person. So that's if you say, oh, this person has died, the first thing is that's a lie. It cannot be true. And then the second stage, anger. You begin to be angry. And then you bargain. You say, if this person survives, if this person is still alive, God, I am going to do this. God, please do this for me. If this person is not dead, I am going to do this. I'm going to do that for you.
Sorry.
So when they are depressed, you move into acceptance. Because according to Sigmund Freud, he said to guys, if the person either mourns, anytime so.
Kicker, it seems
Yeah.
we're also struggling with your network.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can. Well, at some point it begins to interrupt your speech.
Sorry about
Yeah.
that.
No.
Okay, so in this model has been interpreted very many times, and that compelled Kubler-Ross to say that the 5 stages are not always experienced by the grieving. Okay, and it does not follow that order. Someone can start with depression before they go into anger, before they go into bargaining. So I'm making this clear to show that this study is not a product of such misinterpretations and misapplications. So in the novel, there is someone called a character called Nana. The argument here is that it is not only the nature of death that affects the nature of grief, but also how important that person was to the bereaved. So in the novel, Nana was like Mama's favorite child. Nana was Mama's favorite person in the whole world. So Nana had very big dreams. He started as a soccer player, and then when his father left them and returned to Ghana, Nana became depressed. Nana was sad, and so he quitted soccer football. So when subsequently he joined basketball and then did very, very well. And then he had an injury that made him, he was given a medicine and then he became addicted to that medicine. So when he died of overdose, that complicated Mama's grief. Now let's move to the stages of grief now. According to Kubler-Ross, the first stage is supposed to be denial, and that is denial of the death of that person. But Mama did not deny the death of Nana. Immediately, Mama was told that Nana died of overdose, of drug overdose. She cried. She accepted immediately that Nana had died. And that contradicts what Kubler-Ross says. According to Kubler-Ross, Mama should have denied the death of Nana, but Mama does not deny the death. Instead, she denies that she is depressed. She denies a whole stage, which is supposed to be the fourth stage of grief. After denial, should have been anger, bargaining, and then depression. But Mama moved from denial to depression, yet she denies that she is depressed, defying what Kubler-Ross says should be the stage of grief. So we say that because of the nature of the grief, because of the nature of the death of Nana and how important Nana was to Mama, Mama had a very complicated grief that does not start with denial of the death, but denial of depression. And it is quite interesting that until the end of the novel, Mama does not accept that she is depressed. She says that depression is an American thing, that for the African, that we are not depressed. And since she's not crying, they cannot say that she's depressed, but that's not true. Mama is depressed, but she denies being depressed because of the complicated nature of the death of Nana and how important Nana was to Mama. So the conclusion is that since the nature of death, since how people die has not been conclusive, we cannot say that how people grieve can be people die. We will also continue to have
Okay. Yeah, I think the network has returned again. But he has already got to the conclusion, and I think we got a greater portion of his presentation. So we may just proceed to the next presenter. Yeah, your network got interrupted. Well, I think you already in the
yes,
conclusion, right?
yes.
If you still have maybe a sentence or two to conclude, no problem. Your time is yet to run out now that
Okay,
you're back.
Okay. So in conclusion, I'm saying that since we haven't had a conclusive way in how people die, since death is one of the sources of grief, and we haven't had a conclusive list of how people die, we cannot have a conclusive list on how people grieve. Since we continue to have complicated ways in which people die, we'll keep having complicated ways in which people grieve, as seen in Yagiasi's Transcendent Kingdom. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Ekike Robon. Yeah, we'll be taking the next presentation from Gideon Umezrike. I think he has joined us now. So Gideon will be taking us on the topic of grief and precarious pregnancies, the ethics of care in Chika Onigwe's the middle data. Please, do you have access to his bio?
I'm muted. Gideon Umezrike holds a master's degree in comparative literature from the University of Nigeria, where his thesis explored transculturality and spatial politics in Anglophone diasporic narratives. He is a PhD candidate in English at the University of Saskatchewan and a beneficiary of the institution's Teacher Scholar Doctoral Fellowship. His scholarly interests are driven by a commitment to examining the intersections of literature, bodily difference, and global culture, with his century Nigerian fiction. Explores how contemporary fiction by Igbo and Yoruba authors employs a unique narrative form, which he terms the infertilitary form, to critique disabling reproductive norms embedded in Nigerian cultures. His forthcoming article is scheduled for publication in the Journal of Transcultural Studies this summer. Gideon, you have the floor.
You are muted. Can you unmute yourself? Gideon, you are muted.
I'm so sorry. I was having some technical difficulty. My laptop started hanging. If you hear my voice kind of sounding croaky, just know that I'm waking up just now. I forgot the time. Was thinking it was supposed to be 6 a.m. here, but it turned out it was at 4:30. I'm sorry about that. My laptop is still hanging. I can't see my screen, but I know that I'm unmuted right now. So I'll just go ahead and
Can see your slide.
okay, it turned out I'm able to see my slide myself. Anyway, I'll just go right ahead. So my presentation is titled "Of Grief and Precarious Pregnancies: The Ethics of Care in Chikunigwe's The Middle Daughter." So I'm arguing in this presentation that Chiku Onigwe's The Middle Daughter as a narrative helps us bring together various critical concepts or critical perspectives such as the ethics of care, as well as disability theory and critical disability studies and post-colonial studies criticism of neoliberalism to critique society's presentation of particularly the female body as a site of contention. So in The Middle Daughter, Chikunigwe constructs a narrative that centers on the emotional, spiritual, and corporal vulnerabilities of young Nigerian women within a system that commodifies care under the pretense of moral responsibility. In the narrative, there is the death of the main character's father, Nani's father, who is called Doda, and her sister, Udodi. This death disrupts the family's close-knit bond, making the protagonist, Nani, driving her into a state of confusion about life, particular existential situation. And then Nani, however, finds solace only in the shoulders of a street preacher, Ephraim, whose regular visits to her family house provides Nani the opportunity to talk about her loss and purge both her tearful emotions about death and her anger at God for allowing such terrible double loss to befall her family. We see Nani stating, "Ephraim's words comforted me. I looked forward to his visits. where my friends and family had treated my grief as if it were something contagious. Ephraim understood. That is from page 46. Ephraim goes ahead to assure Nani of the normacy of her grief, telling her, "When my own family demised, I did not bathe, I did not eat. For months, they took me to the hospital and forced food into my mouth. I was walking around like a madman." However, as Nani bonds with Ephraim, the preacher, through the confessional expressions of her grief, Nani falls prey to Ephraim's exploitation and eventually becoming pregnant for the street hustling preacher, whose main objective is the possession of Nani's body and mind as a form of capital. Similar to Ephraim's exploitation of Nani's grief, Nani's mother opens a medical clinic where she exploits the precarity and grief of teenage pregnant girls who are unable to get help through a government-controlled welfare system. So I'm arguing that the novel's depiction of grief in these categories, particularly the grief of young women who are pregnant, as well as the grief of those who have lost persons in death, serves as a way to critique society's exploitation of the sick body, particularly the body seen as something out of the normal. And it also serves as a narrative strategy through which Onigwe critiques the way spiritual and health institutions exploit human suffering. So grief becomes, on the one hand, a window into the soul, and on the other hand, a site where systemic injustice is enacted. This double depiction allows the novel to interrogate the ethical failures embedded in Nigeria's spiritual care industry and healthcare system. In both, we see care being monetized, both in the healthcare system and in the spiritual care system, and vulnerability becomes a commodity. So the novel frames a grief as a potentially transformative state, which here draws from the Christian idea of mourning as a spiritual journey. I'm arguing that in this we find echoes with the concept of spiritual convalescence time, a term used by Krinke, who is a Victorian disability scholar. She describes the spiritual renewal that individuals end through grief, a situation whereby the individual may realign with divine truths or discover moral clarity. In the context of the novel, we have Nani, whose grief serves to provide an opportunity for her to draw closer to God. In this context, grief offers the possibility of healing and reawakening. However, I'm arguing that Onigwe's narrative portrays grief as a site of exploitation as well. It becomes clearer in the novel that the institutional systems surrounding grief do not always honor its spiritual potential. Instead, they often serve to deepen the trauma, using it as an entry point for manipulation and profits. The religious figures and organizations in the middle data do not care about guiding the grieving toward healing. Rather, they exploit them in exchange for promises of salvation and relief, which is something that seems prevalent within the Nigerian society, and particularly in the context of Onigwe's narrative, bringing together several theoretical standpoints, such as neoliberalism, the critique of neoliberalism as post-colonial studies critique of the of extractivist ideals. This aligns with the situation in, or rather, with the theoretical standpoints in what we refer to as the disability studies critique of the ethics of care, whereby care is portrayed as resulting in an individual's upliftment, but as well as providing a situation whereby the individual could be exploitation. So this exploitation is not limited to spiritual domain in the novel. Rather, it also connects to the health care system. So the novel critiques the commodification of the pregnant body, particularly in the context of teenage pregnancy. Nigwe's depiction of the pregnant body, particularly in the context of teenage pregnancy, serves to show how the notion of baby factories is not simply something that is not something that is in a way about providing care, but more about providing or exploiting the individual. So I'm drawing from Levinas's philosophical model, whereby there is the critique of the notion of the other, the way otherness could become not something that is used to, not something about caring for another person, but about exploitation. And in this, we see a moral failure, which the novel seems to be depicting. So it is worth noting that Onigwe's novel does not merely indict these systems of care, that is the health care and the spiritual care systems, but it explores the possibilities of ethical care outside of institutional framework. In the novel, there are moments of genuine empathy and solidarity that provide glimpses of what a more ethical mode of care might look like. These moments are often fleeting though, but they are not insignificant, and they suggest that while institutional care may be compromised, interpersonal care still holds ethical promise. In these intimate spaces, the novel suggests that the face of the other, according to Levinas, can still be seen, and the call for responsibility can still be upheld. So I've reached the conclusion that The Middle Daughter contributes to a growing body of African literature, which interrogates the intersections of gender, power, and ethics in contemporary society. And by foregrounding the experiences of grieving pregnant girls caught in exploitative systems of care, Onigwe invites us to consider what it truly means to be responsible for the other. Thank you so much for listening.
All right, thank you very much, Gideon. Thank you to all our presenters. Yeah, we've had some troubles getting Arianta's presentation, and she just messaged in the chat that she has changed location. Maybe you could use 2 to 3 minutes to listen to the remaining portion of her presentation. Arianta, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
Just you may just present your argument and conclusion. We no longer have time, please.
Okay. It's
Thank
all
you.
right. Let me go to my findings. I looked at the death of Vivek through the lens of grief, unlike what others have been doing over the years, looking at it through the lens of homosexuality and all kinds of sexuality. Because there is lesbianism, there is homosexuality, there is incest. In fact, any kind of sexuality you can think about took place in that particular work. Grieving mother, especially the unprovoked, brazen, and bizarre type, hurts with a certain piquancy, aptly captured by Akweke in the death of Vivek Oji. Vivek's death is shrouded in mystery and confusion all through the work from the very beginning, and this heightens the intensity of both the collective and personal grief, even as his friends and relatives seek different ways to grieve the palpable pain of his loss. Trauma theory, equally encapsulates the grief that the grieving family members experience. It was able to tell us how to interpret this text. Using trauma theory, one could see that grief overwhelms an individual, such that the person, loses self in sorrow. The person can no longer have confidence within himself. At some point, you see Vivek's mother questioning herself, questioning others, trying to find out exactly how her son died. And she tells her friend Maja, I can't keep quiet. I want to know what killed my son. And she has every right to question what killed her son, but in so doing, she was also getting herself exceedingly worked up, to the extent that she was even snapping at children. When they finally have reasons to believe that Vivek was murdered, because from the very beginning, nobody knew what killed Vivek, but his friends took some of his pictures to the mother to explain to the mother that he was a homosexual. Unknown to the woman and her husband, they never knew that their golden boy was a homosexual until he died. At the sight of those pictures, the mother could not believe it and started accusing those children. Just when they believed that it was because of his sexuality that he was murdered on the very day of the riot in the market, there was a flashback to the events of that day. In page 166, that was where we discovered that it wasn't during the riot that Vivek was killed.
Thank
Vivek
you.
was
You may
killed.
need to conclude now. Sorry.
I'm in my conclusion.
All right.
Yes, I'm in my conclusion. I said that it is not until the end, precisely in page 166, that the manner of Vivek's death is revealed. His death was an accident, yet his family and friends, apart from Oster, are unaware of it till the end of the story. It became his private secret, known to him alone. This makes his personal grief sharper than others. Katikaru's literary trauma theory goes a long way in explaining the fragments, narrative disturbances, and repetitions witnessed in the reading of the text. Without that theory, we may stand why there were gaps, where there were, because when you are reading, at some point, you begin to wonder, it doesn't flow in a chronological form. Rather, at some point, you begin to see somebody's thoughts, to the extent that even Vivek's thoughts were x-rayed when he was already dead. So my argument in this work
Thank
is that
you. We may not be able to proceed with your presentation. Sorry, we don't have
Thank you
time
very much.
anymore. All right. Yeah, thanks again, all our participants and our presenters. Now is the time for questions, comments, your reactions to any of the presenters. Those who are joining physically, you are welcome to make your contributions. If anyone has anything to say, you could just indicate by raising your hand. Okay, I can see some hands up. Yeah, can you come close to the mic? Yeah, come close to the mic so we can hear you very well.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can you come close?
The mic is close now. Can you hear me now, please? Those online, please.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
All right,
you.
thank you. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate all the presenters. Thank you so much for a wonderful work being done. I'd like to observe and ask a few questions or contribution, whichever it is, please. You help me out. Number one thing I discover is that since then we are following you people, apart from an icon that stationed his slide, other presenters, it didn't carry us along with your slides. That would have helped us a little to follow you better. You understand? Because you did this job and you know better. And somehow, maybe we're dozing off, or have been able to pick one or two things by viewing some things from your work. That's on a general note. I want to ask, I think this goes to all the presenters, or maybe whoever can answer, it's just a general question. Your own submission on this grieving suicide, murder and loss, based on your topic, what is your submission to that? Death, we all know that is inevitable and is a way to all mortals. And from one end to another, somehow we encounter this, and it's just the reality of life. We can't do it without it. Though some people's extension of grief may differ from another. So I want to know your submission on this, concerning this subject matter. Then if I may say, maybe by way of contribution or whatever, I don't know how I want to put that very one. If we, maybe, I don't know how it's happening out there, But from my own side, maybe the little part of my own African area, if we avoid looking for what causes the death of our loved ones, because no matter how you search for it, you want to take revenge or something, you won't grieve the more by doing that. I think it will help us to over time to get healed if we avoid maybe searching for the reason for this and that and that. I know there are different kinds of mourners. Some mourn because of maybe one reason or the other. But apart from that, generally, I want to say that while we are living on earth, it will be nice that we build a healthy relationship among ourselves as we are living. So that if anybody leaves, at least you know that at least you spend a better part with the person, before the part. Because I know that sometimes when we grieve based on maybe our encounter with the person, or what would not do for the person, or what would have done, or something like that. Everybody have their own different reasons, different mourners and all of that. On the whole, I want to thank you all for this very research. I never know that they can research about that until I just found this topic, and I just have to come here and come and learn from all of you. Thank you once again for the research.
All right, thank you very much for both your question and the comments. Sorry, we forgot to mention that if you are asking question, maybe you could tell us your name and, or if possible, your affiliation as a way to possibly connect with you afterwards. Yeah,
Okay.
the floor is open. Whoever has a reaction to a question or comments, yeah,
Okay, I do.
uh,
I do. I don't know if she can hear me. Thank you very much
Loud
for
and
your
clear,
question.
loud and
It's
clear. Elizabeth,
very
Elizabeth.
good. Okay, Elizabeth, thank you for your question. In answer to what you asked about our individual submissions, I worked on the death of Vivek Oji, written by Akweke Emezi, and I discovered that in that particular text, his loved ones, the loved ones of Vivek, his family members, grieved so much because they loved him. Now I'm talking about not going to search for what killed a dear one. Do you get? It could be confusing. Why I say so is that you will keep blaming yourself. Why did I not even try to find out what happened to this person? In the case of Vivek, it was as if there was a conspiracy of silence. The more the mother was making inquiries, the more she was searching for questions to her answers, the more they were eluding her until she discovered that her friend's children might have an idea as to what killed Vivek, and she started visiting them one by one. Eventually, Vivek was not killed by because Osita went to protect him. Here is
Oh, not again.
yeah, sorry, we've lost her again. Oh, okay. The floor is still open
the young man.
for question. Okay, sorry, your network started again, Henrietta. Yeah.
Even now?
Now we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So, in the end, the book contains about 175 pages. It was towards the end of the work that we discovered that Vivek was not murdered by
his friends.
And they were because they felt that he was murdered in cold blood. Okay, so that's that intensity with the mystery surrounding his death also propelled them to search for answers even more. And when the mother got the answer that she sought, she nearly fainted, and she related it to her husband. But in the end, it was discovered that it wasn't because of his sexuality. It was because he was being protected. Osita was holding him, and he dragged his hand forcefully from Osita. Then he landed with his head, on a stone and died instantly.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. We may still have other people that may want to react to the question and comments, or that may have specific questions for the presenters. So, from those attending online, if you have a question, you can indicate by raising your hand. Okay, yeah, Peter. Peter, go ahead. Unmute yourself and proceed. Can you hear me? Okay. Peter, are you there? Hello, Peter. We can't hear you, sorry. You are currently muted. Can you unmute yourself and proceed? Oh no. Yeah, we can't hear you, sorry.
He unmuted himself. We will hear him now.
Yeah, I think he's having some technical challenges. So while he sorts himself out, any other person that has question can proceed.
I would like to comment on Elizabeth's question in relation to my work, if that is okay.
Sure.
So Elizabeth, you were asking about asking why or if actually it is necessary to ask about what killed so and so person, what killed a beloved one or such. So in my work, I'm exploring Chikunigwe's novel, The Middle Doctor, from through the intersection of disability studies, the ethics of care, and post-colonial studies and critique of neoliberalism. So in this narrative, we have a young girl who has lost her elder sister in the United States, and then her father to cancer. The father's death is easily explainable as, okay, he is killed by cancer. However, the elder sister in the United States, her death is one of a hit and run by a drunk driver, also to say. Now, this particular character goes ahead to continue mourning the father and the sister way beyond what everyone expects in her family. Her sister, other surviving sister, and the mother are done with their mourning, at least in the active sense of it. But she, the main character, Nani, continues mourning. And when somebody, a pastor or a street preaching hustler, walks into her life, she gets she easily bonds with this young man because he provides the opportunity for her to continue mourning and asking those questions no other person gives her the opportunity to ask. The question of why did God allow this to happen? And then in that process of bonding, we see that in asking questions, one can actually fall prey to exploitation by persons who weaponize one's grief as a tool to use to, say, exploit the grieving. So it is necessary to ask questions, but at the same time, too, one should be careful so that one does not become one does not become an industry to be exploited, because it seems like the spiritual care industry seems to prey on the belief of those who seem to be looking for spiritual care, especially when deaths occurred. Um, I could speak of this from both a personal experience and from the work I'm doing, because in the past 7 months or thereabouts, I lost my elder brother as well as my dad, both deaths happening within a period of 2 months interval. So when these deaths occurred, there were the question of, hey, why did this happen? Why did God allow this to happen? And several persons came up with, hey, we need to actually go and ask questions. What killed these people? Why did God allow this to happen? Were these natural deaths and all? So some members of my family went ahead to ask
Make
questions,
findings.
and in making findings, they had to pay heavily in making findings. And for me, well, I wouldn't allow myself to fall to such exploitation because, in my own view, death has occurred, and no amount of finding is
And
going
bring
to
the
bring
person back.
about.
Yes.
No amount of finding could bring about and could bring the person back to life. So grieving and asking questions, making findings could become an opportunity for somebody to be exploited, even
Exploitation,
as
yeah.
one is seeking
Mourning,
support
grieving.
and care.
African
Great
history.
response. Elizabeth, we still return to your question regarding the subject matter of the panel, which is grieving, suicide, and murder and lost bodies. But before that, we may still want to respond to presenters or address some of the concerns raised in the papers we received from the presenters. I don't know if anybody has question. Before that, I think I have one or two comments on some presentations. This is for Peter. I don't know if Peter is still available or whether we've lost. I don't think. Oh, he's not. Then Ukweze, Ukweze took us on grief and disenfranchisement. So I don't know if you consider that's Ukweze, if you consider the conceptualizing grief and disenfranchisement. I may have lost that portion of your presentation. So maybe to further situate your textual analysis or a way of carrying your readers along with the analysis or the meaning of a grief disenfranchisement. So it is not just taken for granted. So the other thing is the way what grief disenfranchisement tends to connote. That's not considering some other people's grief valid. So I was wondering if uh, not something that could be weaponized to discourage a practice of gay rape, maybe which many African cultures are still averse to, like by disenfranchising grief from certain maybe gay partners. The grief of gay partners becomes something as a kind of a weapon to discourage such kind of practice. And the other thing is to what extent can grief and disenfranchisement be read as a form of cultural resistance to a certain dimension of change? Because looking at the instances we provided from text, is there a way this could be seen as a way society is trying to, oppose this dimension of change taking place, like that has already begun to evolve by not considering some people's grief of their partner as legitimate? If you, yeah, this is more like a comment, something you may just consider if you don't have any response to that. Then the next comment is on the that's a kicker yeah. Can you hear me, Kikero?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, all right. Yeah. Looking at the critique or the remodeling of Kubler-Ross model you presented, I don't know if your study also pays attention to the merit of that model. I know you more like use the transcendent kingdom to critique the model. But I was thinking if some kind of fairness doesn't require acknowledging the merit, like where the model thrives, the five models of grief are outlined, at least some sources of the model in some other readings, maybe not directly related to the test. Why your test in this case serves as an exception and a way to, remodel it. So maybe it is something you could consider. At least acknowledge some of the merits of the model in your discussion. Then you could go ahead to highlight the shortfalls in relation to your primary test. So, yeah, I
Thank
don't think
you.
I have. Yeah, you're welcome. Then, for Henrietta, um, you may need to consider the point you raise in the interplay of identity loss, grief, and vulnerability in the test, because it seems your focus is primarily on grief. So if you are exploring the nature of grief on the test, then the interplay of identity, loss, vulnerability, I don't know how you intend to bring them in, but from the points you presented, even though we lost some of your
Presentations.
presentation, I think your main focus was on grief. So if you are making claim on the interplay of identity and all this, but they are lost in your presentation, then there seems not to be proper justice done to the key items you highlighted in your abstract. So maybe it's something you could find a way to address. Yeah,
Thank you
the
very
floor is
much.
still open for who has comment on questions. Thank you.
Still have plenty time.
Okay.
We can have up to 5 more minutes of conversation.
If I'm still privileged to speak.
Oh, yeah, sure.
All right, thank you. Once again, Elizabeth Anthony is my name. I'd like to still speak to Usoro. Are you still there? Anekan. It's like he's not there again.
So
I wanted to ask
he's
him.
not.
Oh, and maybe other presenters may have one thing to say about that as a way of discussion. He was talking about, I think I remember hearing teenage pregnancy and all of that. And I think some parts here in Nigeria, we have a cultural setting where they even get married to teenage age. And I'm sure pregnancies are coming up. And apart from that, in our natural environment, what we are seeing here, we have seen a whole lot of teenagers being pregnant. How, I don't know, the possibility or ways we can use in reducing mortality among these teenage age, okay, the expectant mothers, because sometimes they're not biologically, let's say biologically strong or something, and then you find them in that state, and they'll call it a unwanted pregnancy. Yeah, in the process of either giving birth or even aborting, we are losing so many of our teenage girls. So what are the possible ways that we can reduce such anomalies? How do I put it? Those challenges, so that we
I think
can reduce grief, because it's not easy or interesting for a mother to give birth to a child and you're burying your child owing to teenage pregnancy or something like that. You can't even say it. You
I think
can't boldly tell people.
it was Gideon that
This network is not friendly.
so your network seems to be breaking. But it seems to be Gideon. If I'm right, I think it was Gideon that teenage pregnancy featured in his presentation. I don't know if he has something to say to that. Not take for granted. He may need some explanation in your paper. At least it's not like a healthcare system that people can easily pick up in the presentation. Spiritual care industry
Okay.
may require some explanation. Yeah, I don't know if you have any comment to the question.
So
Yeah, thank you.
my conceptualization of the term spiritual care industry draws from a critique of neoliberalism, because then it begins to capture spirituality as a form of a thread to whereby an individual, in this case, a pastor or a priest, positions themselves as a carer for the spiritually sick. And in this instance, then it could be compared to the healthcare sector where there is a doctor and the doctor provides care and receives pay either directly, as we see in private hospitals, or through the management of a hospital, as we see in the public care system. However, the spiritual care industry, as I'm terming it, is in a way buying off the idea that today's spirituality is one that is neoliberal, one where there is a kind of a trend that is based on the freeness of market forces, whereby any person at all could just wade in without say government control or such. So coming to Elizabeth's question about reducing of reducing of
Teenage pregnancy,
teenage pregnancies and
which leads
mortality.
to death. Yeah.
Well, so what we see in the middle daughter is that the individual, the woman who is grieving, the woman who has just lost her husband, opens up a clinic, a private clinic. However, the private clinic, which is open with the intention of providing care for teenage pregnant girls, in a way degenerates into a baby factory, which is basically focused on say exploiting these
Ah,
women.
child.
So we go say that then it calls on the government to provide a government-controlled welfare system whereby care could be provided for those who are in that precarious situation, so that precarity does not become a commodity being exploited by those that provide such care under the name of baby factories, which is well, a pejorative term, and one that is rightfully so too. So government intervention could be necessary in this, is very necessary in this aspect if we are going to see any reduction in at least or control of the way care is provided for teenage pregnant ones in Nigeria.
All right.
And Sosni, so much for mentioning the spiritual care industry.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we already don't have time again. I don't know if you quiz has any comment for Elizabeth on her question regarding our panel, because I think she raised something central to the focus of our panel, grieving suicide, mother, and lost body. So if you do, you can just say something while we say goodbye to our
Yes,
participants.
we are not saying goodbye to anybody. We are saying welcome to all of you instead, because this is the beginning of I'm taking this as a entry point into trying to answer that question about what are the center of our panel. So a lot is beginning to happen in the 21st century Nigeria. We heard about electoral violence. We saw precarity. We saw a lot of changing ways of dying. Cultural changes generally are beginning to affect, or how they affect ways of mourning or the culture of mourning. So for this, in the previous part of this session, talked about assumed death. You are not sure someone is dead, but something tells you maybe they are dead. So how do we mourn these kinds of death? The presenter called it assumed death. So these are different difficult kinds of death that we want to think about how do we mourn these kinds of death, and then how is the new ways of mourning redetermining or redefining us as humans. And that's why we heard from one of our presenters, I think also in the previous session, in the previous part of the session, speak about how we are reconstituted by mourning or by grief. The loss of a person could reconstitute our being such that we may cease or we may be caught at the center of what was and what is. And even through this, we can fashion out what could eventually become. There are many more dimensions to go on this. So this is just a tip of the iceberg around what we are thinking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We've already been reminded of time, so we've used up our time. Yeah, we still invite those who are interested in the panel to connect with us after this as we forge ahead with conversation. We have a special issue forthcoming that will be forthcoming, which will be an outcome of this intellectual gathering. So feel free to reach out to us to connect with us after this. Thank you very much for being here with us and providing us your audience and also being part of the presentation. So we hope to connect with you afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you.